I have recently been forced to conceptualize the notion of conspiracy in such magnanimous proportion. It eclipses in its all encompassing shadow all other mind blowing, universe altering revelation as far as effectual truth and what they mean for world. And though I am far from resolving its deeply profound riddle as possibility, it has nevertheless damaged foundational truth when it comes to astronomical insight, cosmological understanding, especially on the motion, formulation, mechanics, structure, and construct of celestial entities, planetary, and star systems. Having studied astronomy as my science in college, I believe myself to have a better grasp of heavenly motion than most, and yet my knowledge on the interaction of the Earth with other objects of our solar and universal system has been diffused in such way I am left in quandary that makes me unable to entertain other focus. Similar to the day after I awoke to the conspiracy of 9/11 and government-sponsored terror, I'm now in need of model which would sufficiently replace in explanation my observation and imagination of how things daily unfold around me as world. Like my cats when I moved them to new residence, having disrupted all they knew as house and living space since their entrance into the world as kittens, I am exploring new boundary and limitation in hopes of bringing sense to the newness of situation in determining the specificity of location which best enables my ability to facilitate survival in both a mental as well as physical sense. Welcome, friends. I'm your host, Garcia. This is FallenAngels.tv, and I thank you for taking the time to join me this Saturday as I speak about what seems to be even a taboo subject for conspiracy realists and those that are used to looking at and going into studying, researching things that by the mainstream and by world are considered absolutely lunatic fringe. And as I stated on another show that I felt the same when many of my listeners kept sending me links to flat earth videos or telling me to study this or that in relation to this particular topic, that it was absolutely a waste of time, and that I didn't want to, because I'm already and focused on trying to finish the many projects and bring to completion some of them so that I can provide information and knowledge to you in book form or video or whatever way it is that I'm trying to get what I consider to be relevant and critical information to you as a public so that you can prepare yourselves for those things that are coming upon us as world, and being at the end of days and with so much as far as the New World Order advancing so quickly and the agenda being accelerated as it is, I'm very careful with my time, and I don't want to. Another thing for myself is due to my disability. I'm only able to do certain things when I'm in my wheelchair, and I have to be productive during that time and utilize it in the best way I can to complete the projects that I'm working on, in being and utilizing access to certain things, skills and computers, technology, whatever it is that I need to advance those different projects, and so I'm limited already in that way, in that I can't just sit up 24 hours a day, or there's a regimented schedule that I have to kind of stick to in order to go about this different way of being. And so I'm extra vigilant in what I focus on and what I prioritize, as far as what I'm going to be doing for the day. And so I was very hesitant, to say the least, to go into this information. And I'm going to talk today about, just kind of my evolution and frame of mind as far as this particular topic, because there's still things that I have yet to figure out, and there's still things that don't make sense to me. But the further I research it, the further I look into it as issue, I'm absolutely convinced that our inherent and our assimilated speculation, as far as we live on a global or spherical Earth, that there are things that are not correct about that as postulation. And so I'll talk about some of those things, but I also wanted to share one other poem with you, and I wrote both of these when I came to the conclusion that we basically had been lied to as far as who we are and where we are as planet, which is the most foundational belief in asserting who we are as humanity. And I'm one of those, like many of you are, that has studied a lot of different things and looked into a lot of what we would consider conspiracy theory, or just nonsensical, meaningless, conspiracy or lunatic fringe that most would not even give any amount of time in doing so. And I found, having done so, that there are so many things that we've been lied to, and that the matrix is so all-encompassing that really we reach a point where we have to doubt everything we've been giving as absolute certainty. And so I have now gone a full 180 degrees in the other direction, as far as giving the world and so-called PhD experts and scientists and doctors and politicians the benefit of the doubt as to what they are talking about and whether it has any basis in truth. And so now, having studied and learned as much as I have, I'm the other way, and I won't believe anything anybody says anymore until having done my own personal research into it as topic, and having discovered and settled in my own mind that it is relevant for accepting as as truth. And so, and this is part of the journey for all of us, and that this is what it has come to, as far as going down the rabbit hole and realizing that there's more. We've been taught more lies than we have truth, and that the propaganda that is spewed out by mainstream, the presses, and the all those that are bought out and that support the Illuminati agenda for whatever it is that they are trying to hoodwink us into believing, that all of these things are partial lies which together construct a huge, a massive, a colossal deception, a spider web of propaganda, just like as depicted in Orwell's 1984, how so many of us have bought into and accepted as truth those things which our parents taught us, our friends, our peers, those things that we believe growing up, that are asserted by the educational systems, the elementary, middle school, college, high school, all those things, the things that we see on TV, which are repeated over and over and over, and which we have determined to be true because of that repetition, and that not having been challenged and not having been confronted with any ideas or any knowledge which would force us to look otherwise at a certain issue and to take on new perspective and to accept new possibility, that we just readily give our faith to those that tell us things. Our whole lives in growing up to be who we are now. And that certainly at some point, usually, when we're middle schoolers or early teenagers, that we start to rebel against forced indoctrination, and we attempt to create personal identity which makes us individualized and that breaks us from the hive mind. And it's those formative years that many of us begin to look into and to research into things that interest us and that would lead us into becoming truly who we are as adults. And the world is constructed, the matrix is constructed in such a way that they don't want us to break away in spirit or in mind, so that we seek out knowledge and things which would make us individuals and that would give us insight into things other than what we are told and what we are indoctrinated and assimilate as young children. And so, that being said, I'm going to read real quick just one more poem, and it will set the foundation for going into some of the details of why it is that I think the way that I think now, and why it is that I do not believe, even though I'm not, 100% certain as to, how exactly the things work as far as the flat Earth. I know that we are not on a spherical planet and that the Earth is not moving. And I'll talk about those things when we come back. But I want to set the foundation for the discussion by sharing with you this poem, which I've never read anywhere else. And it's perfect for this discussion and this particular topic, because for many of us, yourself included, if you have decided to journey down the rabbit hole that is the flat earth discussion. Also, I need to let you know that on the fallenangels.tv website, I have created a group specifically for this topic. And if you've never been there, never established a profile, never answered the questions that I ask, and for those that join as a member, there are a lot of really what I consider to be advanced thinkers there at the site, and which frequent it readily, looking for information and also posting up, asking questions. And that if you want to join the debate, or if you have information that you'd like to share with a group of seekers, not saying everybody there has accepted or bought into this as belief system, but that we're open to exploring new possibilities, that Fallen Angels TV is a great community, a great group of seekers that are willing to look into things rather than just shun them off or cut them off from our research just because somebody says that things are the way that they are and that's just the way it is, or because our pastor or preacher says that these particular books are bad, or that they're Gnostic, or that they're Antichrist, or whatever, and that you don't, we want to study for our own selves and make up our own minds. And so that's the kind of people that you can collaborate with and fellowship with there at the site. And I consider it to be a blessing to have been able to facilitate that for so many that otherwise would not have a community to share with or to talk with in exploring all of these different kinds of issues. All right. I'm perceiving the creation with renewed conviction, deliberating over whether I'd been taught a misnomer of lies, the likes of which had formerly entrenched my educational bias towards habitation upon a spherical earth, comparison to every globe sitting atop teachers' desks. As inheritors of the grand matrix, we as children are indoctrinated into speculative assumptions based upon a carefully crafted web of deceit, so all-consuming. Is my postulation that we live on a planetary globe truly warranted? Awakening makes one question everything thought relevant. All that one had once so innocently accepted in assurance as evidentiary truth must be reassessed upon the certainty that there is no absolute truth when evaluating the preponderance of lies emblazoned onto our unquestioned resolve as innocent child mind slate. And so once again, I find myself in that zone of nihilistic persuasion, reality shattered and manifest knowing shaken to the core, deliberating over what I thought seminal truth, our most foundational belief. This challenge strikes at the core of who and where we are as people, living upon miracle blue marble, spinning counterclockwise in a similarly rotating planetary system, with angelic sun at its vibrant diamond center? We are informed that primordially ejected bodies spit out from the core of stars result in planetary accretion, that the Earth as cosmological debris gravitationally attracted mass and assumed orbit around our sun, which itself is contained in orbit around some grand universal center. A theoretical black hole, science asserts, though no one has ever seen, of such immense gravitational pull, even light cannot escape its destroying grasp. Have we all been held hostage to some secret societal Freemasonic accord, a pervasive deception so colossal only those in the know understand our planetary situation? And do the global elite celebrate such manipulation, honoring such conquest by flaunting insider knowledge and privilege, flying the United Nations flag with depiction of a flat earth holding all nations in singular circular embrace, at the building which best represents their assertion of power as throne of world government and new world order. All right, so those are my thoughts on the flat earth, and now I'm going to go into some of what led me to question and to challenge why it is that I do not anymore accept nor believe that we are living on a spherical earth. Also, I have to make an announcement that I'm going to end this show at 6 o'clock. I have to be a guest tonight on a program called On the Street, which is hosted by Wayne. It's onthestreet.com, and he wants me to speak about a lot of esoteric topics that I've covered, but specifically the Apollo 20 mission. And for those that have not heard about, I've done a number of shows on that. And so I had forgotten that I needed to do this evening, and so I'll pick this up again because I am learning so much about this as issue and as topic, and so I'm going to consider just a few things. First, I'm going to start with the United Nations flag, and if you have any questions, certainly pass them in the chat room, and then I will get to them as I can. And all right, I want to start with the United Nations flag. And as I said at the end of that poem, is this the global elite flaunting their insider knowledge about understanding and knowing that the round earth is based on deception? And if this is the case, and if they are contriving the whole we live on a round planet, a spherical planet that is spinning, is just one of those that is spinning around our sun, and that the sun also is spinning around some galactic center, what would be the purpose? And who would construct and be able to achieve and to pull off such a colossal deception? Why? Of what benefit? And why would they even attempt to do so? What would be the point? And so, having thought about that, and thinking about the United Nations flag and how it's broken down in a grid And for those that don't know what I'm talking about, just Google search if you have access to the web, to your computer and the internet right now. Just Google search United Nations flag or UN flag, and you'll see that it shows what is called a azimuthal. I'll actually pull it up real quick. It shows what is called and I hope that I'm saying this right, an azimuthal world map, which depicts the world on a flat Earth plane, with the North Pole as its center, and with with the other planets then spread out, and that the southern hemisphere represents, or the southern pole, or Antarctica represents the extremities or the limits of this flat Earth map. All right, let me pull this up. And another thing which is interesting about this particular flag, this is what they say of it. A map of the world representing an azimuthal equidistance projection centered on the North Pole, inscribed in a wreath consisting of cross-conventionalized branches of the olive tree. The projection of the map extends to 60 degrees south latitude and includes 5 concentric circles. And another thing that is interesting about the UN map is that those 5 concentric circles, that when the division of the spokes of the wheel that break out from the polar north or the North Pole, and is that it makes up 33 different sections, and that we know that the 33 is a Masonic number, and that it's one of those that is placed and part of a lot of things that are also conspiratorial in nature, and that the Illuminati encoded it as a number into a lot of things, anything that has to do with the Freemasons, or to Satanism, Luciferianism, or in connections to the powers, the principalities, and the rulers of darkness. In this case, the world elite, because the globalists, these transnationalists, and that make up those that are the ruling families, the ruling bodies of the world, that are sitting on all the thrones of the world, they were the ones that have been conspiring and pushing for the creation of the United Nations. And that Albert Pike, long ago, in a letter to Giuseppe Mazzini, which he was the head of the mafia, the Italian mafia, they talked about foment 3 global wars in order to introduce and to get the people of the world to accept an organization which would have credibility and reputation to govern world affairs, and that would have such power as to be able to trump nationalist decree or the individualized will of nations. And that these 3 global wars, beginning with World War I, that at every attempt after the creation of such wars by the Illuminati, and that they profited off of funding both sides and of creating minorities in order to establish the 2 sides for the manipulation of such global conflict, that they have always utilized controlled opposition in their ability and their attempts to foment a particular agenda or aspect of the agenda. And that after the First World War, we had the introduction of the League of Nations, which was the first attempt to create an organizing body which would be looked to by the nations of the world and be granted authority which be significant for the global elite in their assertion of power and the centralizing of it. Because the Satan in the New World Order, even though it's not nothing new about the attempts of Satan as the power and principalities, these rebel angels, the fallen angels, or the Anunnaki, whatever you want to call them, in their attempts to unify world for in global world order, that this has been the dream of Satan since his being cast out of the upper heavens. And also the rebel angels that joined him in rebellion and in their war against the Most High and the Son, going back to the second day. And that the real purpose of the New World Order is to establish centralized power, but also worship. Because that's what he really wants, is he wants to be worshipped by the Most High. He wants to be as God and to steal the prayers and the reverence of the Most High and the Son, and to divert it to himself. And that's the real purpose of the New World Order, and has been. All of the global population, the things that are listed in the whole thing, as far as the commandments that are on the Georgia Guidestones, those are just things in order to assert and to bring about his being as God himself. All right, and so anyways, going back to particulars, because I know we're going to quickly run out of time. The first thing that stood out to me, besides the UN flag and they're flaunting it, is the curvature of the earth. And how is it that if we live on a spherical earth, that things such as lighthouses or even the Statue of Liberty or different landmarks, things that are iconic, even cityscapes, even like with when the World Trade Centers existed, and their how it is that you can see them for very long distances, when, according to the scientific model, if we lived on a spherical Earth, that these things should be below the horizon as far as the parallax, which is our line of sight. And so, and another thing is, like when you climb up the Himalayan mountains, Mount Everest, or you take, even like with the new One World Trade Center, when you go to the very top of it and you look out in every direction at the horizon, how it is absolutely flat, and the horizon remains level all the way around. And that, no matter how high you go, you can see that there's not a curvature to the earth, but it just remains constant and flat, going all the way to, like, say you're, like even with the sunset or sunrise, how, and those are other things that I didn't understand initially, but that you can explain with the way that the with the night and day are created much like the yin yang symbols, with the opposition of the moon and the sun. And that what my son asked me earlier, he was like, well, if the sun is above the flat earth plane, why is not the entire earth always and constantly illuminated? And I said, and answered him that it like if you took a huge, like a kitchen table, and you had a flashlight, and you took this flashlight and moved it in a circle in a counterclockwise fashion around the, the table representing the earth, that if it's not as high up and if it's not as big as we consider it to be, that it would only illuminate a portion of the table, and that portion which is not illuminated would be in shadow. And that this is what happens as far as sunrise and sunset, is that that portion which is not illuminated, as the sun goes around in circle, it creates the perspective that the sun is rising or setting, but that really the only thing that is happening is that the shadow moves into, or the, we either enter into the shadow or we enter into the light, which creates night and day. One other thing, as far as the curvature of the earth, is that the people that build the bridges, that, like in China, they just recently built what is the longest bridge ever in the history. I don't know if ever in the history of humanity, but as far as modern history, it's considered to be the longest bridge. And the engineers of that bridge, they never built into or had to in their mathematical calculations as to the engineering of this bridge and its completion as a feat, never take into consideration the curvature of the earth. And why is that? If you have, supposedly after a very short distance, you should have the curvature affecting even the line of sight. And so that was another thing that proved to me that we are on a flat earth. And now with our high-powered telescopes and cameras, that it used to be said that you could watch a ship disappear into the horizon, and because of the curvature of the earth, you would slowly watch it dip over the horizon, and until you could only see the upper half of the ship, until eventually it sailed so far out of sight that the mast disappeared, and that this was verification that we lived on a curved earth. But now with high-powered telescopes and with even cameras with long-range zoom, you can see that this is not the case, and that you can watch a ship miles and miles and miles away, and it remains constant on the horizon. It's the same thing for cities and the cityscapes, going out far to sea or to, upon an ocean, and even with the levels, with the oceans, when there's not a wake or when there's not waves, that they are perfectly flat all the way to horizon. And so, these are two things that made me that question my acceptance that we live on a round or spherical earth. Also, if you look into the Book of Enoch, which when I used to read the Book of Enoch, those portions which were talking about the motions of the sun and the moon and in relation to things such as the ends of the earth, all that didn't make sense to me. I didn't understand it. I kind of just glanced over it, and certainly I read through it initially, but that I didn't understand it as concept. And so these are things that now make sense to me. Even the quote in Isaiah that speaks about the circle of the earth. Let me pull that up for you real quick. All right. Where it says, "It is he that sitteth upon the circle of the earth, and the inhabitants thereof are as grasshoppers, that stretcheth out the heavens as a curtain, and spreadeth them out as a tent to dwell in." The circle of the earth doesn't represent a spherical or a globe as far as the earth, but the roundness of what is the flat earth plane. And then spreadeth them out as far as the heavens, out as a curtain over the circular earth. That would make sense as far as the depiction of a tent, if you consider the floor of the tent being the flat earth plane. And so these kind of things, because everybody always quotes that Isaiah 40:22 as verification that we live on a round earth, until you understand it in its depiction. And so these are just some of the things. In Jeremiah, it speaks about the ends of the earth, and I'm not going to go into all of those. I will at a later date, but I'm pressed for time. I want to try to cover as much as I can in this show with talking about those things that challenged my assumption that we lived on a spherical earth. And so those are two things, the curvature of the earth. The other one is if, according to scientists, that if we are spinning as a planet at 1,000 miles an hour at the equator, it didn't make sense to me how it was that if you took an airplane flight and say that the airplane is able to go 500 miles an hour, if it's flying east, would it not lose ground? Especially if you're at the equator and the earth is spinning at 1,000 miles an hour, wouldn't it lose a lot of ground because it can only go 500 miles an hour, and therefore the earth is actually spinning at a quicker rate than it's able to make up in distance going east? And also, if a plane, say, if it goes west 500 miles, wouldn't the rotation of the earth, the spinning of the earth, wouldn't it bring that destination a lot faster to the plane and to the passengers that have taken said flight? And if the earth is spinning at 1,000 miles an hour, you would think that in just its own rotation, that the destination would come quickly to those that are in or have boarded that particular flight. But that's not the case, in which this will prove that the earth does not move and that we are not spinning, is that you can take a flight, you can go east or west or north, you can go around in a circle, and that the earth will remain stationary. And that if you take a plane that goes 500 miles an hour and you fly it 500 miles to the east, you're going to end up 500 miles away from the point of origin. And it's the same thing for going west or going north or going south. That the earth is not moving, and you do not have to make up for the said spin in any kind of way, which proves that it is motionless and it's not moving. And so and I'm going to get to the question that I asked about who benefits and why it is that the global elite would band together to foment such a huge and pervasive deception. But I have to, kind of talk about these things first. Another thing is, if a pilot, if you are an airline pilot and you're flying towards the east or to the west, don't you have to kind of always point the nose of the plane in a downward trajectory to stay in alignment with the so-called curvature of the Earth? Otherwise, if you're just flying level and you just, maintain that trajectory going east or west, at some point you're going to reach a very high altitude, even to the point of, going into space, should that be possible. And if you're not, if the Earth is spinning and you're also, having to make up for that curvature, you would have to always kind of have the nose of the plane heading towards the ground in order to make up for the curvature of the Earth. And this is the whole, the way that they get us to believe that there are satellites. Somebody's asking about satellites in the chat room. And this is one of the things that initially, when I began to look into the flat Earth, I didn't understand how it is that satellites. But according to the way that science and scientists have established that there are all these thousands of satellites up there in orbit around the Earth, is that the only way that satellites would work is if they, and not have to utilize fuel, is if they were constantly falling. And that once they reached a certain altitude, in that they would always be falling around the Earth. And in that way, if we were living on a spherical Earth, in that way they would be able to maintain their elevation and not have to utilize fuel to maintain trajectory, to maintain altitude. That the so-called International Space Station, that it works in similar fashion. The Hubble telescope, anything that is up there and has been up there for a long time, it would have to utilize this principle to stay in orbit around the Earth. And so this was one of those things that I did not get and did not understand. And so I Googled or YouTube searched, actually, satellites in the flat Earth model. And it's then that I found out and learned that satellites are not possible, and that, like the whole conspiracy of 9/11 and even that of the flat Earth, that according to the thermosphere and the temperature of the thermosphere and the movement, the so-called trajectory that a satellite would have to be following, the speed that it would have to fall in order to maintain a certain altitude above the Earth, that according to the temperature of the thermosphere, that whatever these satellites are made of, unless they're made of lead, and it is claimed that they are made of very malleable and lightweight carbon fiber or gold and silver to reflect the sun's rays and to prevent the radiation from damaging very sensitive computerized instruments, that all of these things are, all of these different satellites, and supposedly there's thousands of them, And so many of us have satellite TV that the only way that these things could maintain this orbit and stay at such altitude is if they were constructed of lead or something which would keep them from some very dense and heavy material, which would keep them from just melting because of not only the temperature of the thermosphere, but also the rate, the speed that they would have to maintain in order to stay in Earth's orbit. And so I have concluded that satellites are not a possibility, and that these satellite TV, that there's a very different way that we receive the signal, and that we are able to, have broadcasted into all of our homes. What we think is a signal from a orbiting, very high altitude piece of equipment, a scientific piece of equipment, which which gives them the ability to provide this as a service. Now, this also, another thing that I thought about was, what about the so-called satellite, the military ability to look down and to spy on people as far as their satellite photography and video imagery, and their ability to look and to even see and detect very small, whatever it is that they're trying to look and to glean and to get data upon. And the only thing that I can really consider and think about this is that it has to be done in the same way that it was done prior to so-called satellites coming into existence, or to the lie that was perpetuated stating that satellites exist, meaning that they have to use very high altitude planes and very powerful instrumentation in order to fake and to pull off the whole scenario, and to get us to believe that these are images from very high altitude, instruments, scientific instruments, so-called military satellites or whatever, and that this is the only way that they could pull that off, and that these things are not just sitting up there in orbit, the many thousands of them that they say they are, because it is not a possibility. And then another thing that piqued my interest and gave me, made me reconsider the whole thing as far as the astronauts' claim and the Apollo missions that we had gone to the moon and that we had achieved such capacity way back when, is the Van Allen radiation belt, and also the videos that have come out of how it is that were never supposed to be leaked to the public, of how it was that the astronauts faked the image of a round Earth, and how they utilized the porthole of their craft, and that they were in very low Earth orbit, not even as high and as far as they had claimed they were, halfway to the moon or whatever, and that they utilized this porthole in order to fake the illusion of a round Earth. And so these are just some of the things that give us, that support the whole illusion that we are living on a spherical Earth. Just another couple things, and then I'll have to go. And I promise to pick this up again, because there's really so much to say. And I've also invited a couple people to come on, and hopefully they'll respond and they can talk about this topic because, as I said, there's so much. And I've been posting a lot of videos about this as a topic on the fallenangels.tv website, so I do invite people to check out some of those. What I consider to be the most relevant in the huge assortment and variety of videos that are available to us, because there's a lot of that are lunacy and that are purposeful disinformation. And so if you don't want to have to reinvent the wheel and have to wade through all of that, you can check out those that I posted to the website. These are certainly not all that is relevant, but some that I consider to be profound. And so, anyways, another thing, as far as with the flights, it's when you try to take a flight from like a very southern portion of South America and Africa and Australia, according to the UN, the azimuthal map. And I'm convinced that it is, that if we live on this flat Earth plane, the southern hemisphere does not meet at the South Pole, but just continues to extend outward from the North Pole. And so flights that you would take between these very southernmost and extreme portions that are near what would be the extents of the continental land masses, that instead of just flying from one point to the other according to what would be a global map, which unites the southern hemisphere at the South Pole, that it's very difficult to find and to book non-stop flights which cover what have to be very extreme distances according to the flat Earth model. And that this seems to be another verification as to that we are not living on a spherical Earth. Well, one other thing I needed to mention as far as the UN map is that this same map of the flat Earth plane, it is also the map for the World Meteorological Organization, the World Health Organization, the International Maritime Organization, as well as the International Civil Aviation Organization. And how is it and why is it that these groups would be represented, these ships and planes, the largest organization for planes and pilots, and also for vessels, boats? Why is it that their flag would be represented by this flat Earth model, unless those that are the leaders, like the global elite that fly the same flag at the United Nations, the throne of world government, how is it and why is it that they would utilize such a flag unless they know something that most of the public is not privy to? And so, I want you to consider that. And again, I apologize for having to dip out and for having to cut this show short, but I will pick it up next week, and then after that, I'll take some time off as far as this particular topic, and I'll go into some of the other stuff that I need to bring out as far as I want to get back into the second book of the writings of Abraham, as well as the continuation of Noah's travels in Europe. And so I thank all of you for joining me. I know this is a very interesting topic, and that for those that have not gone into it, have not researched it in any way or looked into it in any kind of profound manner, don't be hesitant. Don't just write it off as meaningless, because I did that for a very long time, and I was surprised, as I still am. I'm surprised at how it is that the elites and Satan, how it is that they have kept this from us as truth. And one final question I want to answer as far as why. The whole reason, in my opinion, that they are trying to propagate that we live on a round earth is so that we do not believe in a special covenant with the Creator and with the creation, and that the earth is just one of the, even in our own planetary, in our own solar system, just one of the many planets that happen to, because of some random chaotic, per chance happening, that we happen to be in the Goldilocks zone, and that's the whole reason why the Earth can support the multiplicity of life that is found here, but that there are many other such planets out there, and that they are all, if they're in the Goldilocks zone, similar as to the equidistance that we have from the sun, that they can also support life, and that there's nothing special about us as a people and as a creature. That is the whole reason why it has been pulled off in the way that it has, is to keep us from realizing our importance and of asserting how special we are to God, in that we were created in His image, and that He gave us gave us life and made us a part of the existence in creation. And so if we were to continue to not think that we are special and that all this is just random chaos, we could so easily have the wool pulled over our eyes, and that they could even get us to believe in things like we are born of, evolved of apes. Anyways, God bless all. I will pick it up next week. Thank you again for joining me, and once again, I apologize that I have to go, but I do have to get ready for that show, and I have a couple things that I have to do. If it wasn't at 7 o'clock, I'd be able to do more. You can catch me at onthestreet.com. Good night, all. God bless.